There she is.
Hi. How are you guys?
Hey.
Hi.
Let me turn on my video. Hi.
Hello. Hi.
We should be expecting, I'm going to start anyway, but we're expecting, I think, quite a bit of people. Okay, I'm going to just take off the recording a second. Hi. Okay, so let me just kind of preface tonight. This is not the Enneagram of personality. I know that this tool has been used for physiological profiles, and you may know your number. If you're a 1 or a 9 or a 7, that is not what this class is about. What this class is about is the mystical Enneagram, the origins of this symbol, how it represents God, the divine within us, and how we can calculate our Enneagram number, speaking of numerology, through sacred geometry of the cycles of our life, and then do some practices in association with that number and track our soul cycles. So I just want to clarify that. We are going to spend a little time calculating your number for the year. All you need is your birthday and your birth month. So we'll get to that towards the end. There is a lot of mysticism in this lecture. There is a lot of symbology, mythology. I want to take my time and make sure that you understand. So just please stop me if you have any questions, and I'll be respectful and just kind of take pauses to make sure that I can address any questions as we go through the sections. If your thing isn't muted, if you mute it, I hear some noise, I'd appreciate that. So let's get started.
Francis, could I ask one quick question? How long is this class?
Well, I scheduled it for 90 minutes, but Henry,
Okay.
I have a tendency of going over. If you have to leave, I will send the PowerPoint and the video after class. So you can, of course, always ask me if you have any questions if you have to leave. I really try to keep it to 90 minutes, but I struggle with that. It's something I'm really working on. So I'm really trying to be respectful of your time.
I just wanted to kind of gauge. No, I haven't said I was leaving. I just wanted to know.
Okay, but I know I do that each class. So thank you for asking the question. So I do plan on 90 minutes, but sometimes I go over. But if you do need to leave, feel free to ask questions after when you finish the recording or you get the materials. I'm always available. So thank you for that question. So first, we're going to start with the origins. And this quote is from a Sufi mystic. Each of the 9 points represent the highest level in the divine presence. They are the keys to unfolding powers within the human being. So this is the symbol of the Enneagram, and it's within a circle. And I'm going to go through all of the symbology of all of these symbols tonight in class. The number 9 is a very spiritual number, and I'm going to explain the importance of that number and what it has to do with our soul. So the word Ennea is 9, and the word gram has to do with a point or something that is written or drawn. So if the number 9 has to do with God, the universe, and the soul, this symbol is representation of how our soul story is written in this particular symbol. So learning how to read the symbol and track your numbers is going to help you unfold your soul story in this lifetime. So the number 9 is considered a sacred number. In Greek mythology, there are 9 muses that work for Aphrodite, who is the goddess of love. So 9 facets of love. The number 9 in tarot is the hermit. The hermit is a person in the tarot that has learned lessons and is closing cycles and moving forward into new cycles because he is wise. The number 9 is a number of higher consciousness. We're going to talk about the 4th dimension this evening. The number 9 in Hindu mythology represents Vishnu. He is the balancer or the neutralizer. The number 9 controls all other numbers. We are going to get into some mathematics tonight as well. And collectively, if we broke down the speed of light, the diameter of the sun, the earth, and the moon, the number of planets, the seconds in an hour, day, week, or year, and the minutes in a day, week, and month, if we broke it down to its simplest root number, we would get the number 9. So we see that throughout the universe, the number 9 is a symbol of a number that's quite sacred. So this Enneagram is from the Sufi tradition. It's very ancient. Its origins per se are not 100% known. I will share in a moment a couple of philosophers that have brought it to our sort of mindset in the way that we use it these days. But it's an original, as per the roots, considered a Sufi tool. And in Sufism, they say that the inner struggle heals the self. So when we start plotting our numbers and we start to learn the purpose of each number in our life for each year that we live, we start to understand that our inner struggle actually has a pattern. Our life actually has a pattern and a cycle. And it's this struggle within that is actually what heals the self or the soul or what makes you whole. So when we complain as humans, obviously, for pain and struggle and suffering, but when we plot all of that into this tool, we can actually see that it is those struggles and those years and the years of growth, the years of silence, the years of withdrawing, all of those patterns create the symbol or the sacred geometry of our life. So we are sort of plotted out and our soul has a pattern. In the Quran, it says, we shall cause them to see our signs on the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is truth. The word horizons in Greek is kyklos, which is a separating circle. And you can see that the Enneagram starts with the circle, and we are going to talk about cosmology tonight and the universe. And it separates from the circle and it creates a triangle that has its own sort of mystical connotation. And it creates this hexagram that's sort of this odd shaped symbol. And we're going to go through both of those. So the circle in symbology, anytime the symbol of a circle, it always means wholeness, God, creation, the universe, the intact being. And it is through this symbol, it is through the numbers, it is through the patterns and cycles and struggles of your life that you actually become whole and you find the truth in yourself. And so within this symbol, there are signs that are hidden. I'm going to share some sacred texts as well. If someone can take off their microphone, I'd appreciate it. I'm hearing some noise. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about some philosophers. So Gurdjieff is an Armenian philosopher, and he is actually the one that brought this symbol to the West. He's not the author, but he's actually the first modern proponent. He had a student named Uspensky, and he wrote a book called In Search of the Miraculous. And in that book, he quotes Gurdjieff. And Gurdjieff says, the Enneagram is a universal symbol. All knowledge is included in the Enneagram. And with the help of the Enneagram, it can be interpreted. Everything can be included in the Enneagram. And what Gurdjieff understood was that all aspects of man, our soul, our heart, our body, is found in this symbol. And this symbol has been explained by many philosophers since. It's been brought into the psychological realm, personality profiles, but its origins are mystical. Its origins are soul and universal. And so really understanding the roots can then, if you're interested in the psychological profile, you're going to have a lot more information about its origin and why it's so powerful. Rene Guénon, in his book Word and Symbol, said that symbolism is of non-human origins. One of the things that I say quite a bit is a symbol is worth 1,000 lifetimes. Symbols are stored in our collective unconscious. And when we see them, we may not necessarily know, but we have lifetime after lifetime connected to the symbology and the symbolism, and they're very powerful and healing as a result. And so we may not know the origins or the roots of the symbol, but it speaks to us, and it's something that has been sort of reframed and worked by many, many psychologists and mystics because it speaks to the soul, the mind, the body, the spirit. And Michelangelo, when he was creating the David, he said that he simply chipped away the stone that didn't look like the David. And when you really understand your numbers and your symbol of your life, the sacred geometry of your life, and how to track your cycles and your patterns, you're going to see that you're so supported. And like that stone that Michelangelo chipped away at, the world is leading you to chip away at pieces of yourself that are no longer useful, that don't support your soul or your divine will. So this is Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff's philosophy was something called the fourth way. I think it's very relevant for the time that we're living in now. He said that we shouldn't be like the fakirs, the monks in monasteries, tucked away in ashrams, that we should practice our spirituality, our growth in the world. And as most philosophers and spiritual teachers teach, man is asleep. And so a lot of his work with the Enneagram was to help students wake up. And then in the latter part of the talk, I'm going to share with you some of his techniques. He said that man is not unified consciousness. Unified consciousness would be the symbol of the circle, that we're whole, that our mind, our body, and our spirit is working in unison. But rather what he said is that we were a lot of different I's. We can call this our egos, our personalities, our masks, our roles in society, and our family. And that all of these different I's were sort of tearing us apart and pulling us into different directions. But if we use the mystical Enneagram and we actually plotted, we'd see that we were guided to become one whole I, or one individuated, conscious, awake self and being. He said that man had 3 centers. One was the head, one was the body, and one was the heart or the soul. And we're going to see the numbers 3, 6, 9 tonight quite a bit, and the meaning of those numbers. And so inherent in his theory, 3 is thought, 6 is the body, and 9 is the soul or the spirit. And we'll see that quite a bit. Any questions so far? Okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit about universal laws, mythology, and symbology. So there are several universal laws that are included in this symbol. The first, the second are pretty similar. They're kind of one and the same. The law of one and the law of mentalism say similar things. The law of one is that all of this is connected. This is all one energy field. And the law of mentalism states that that is created in our mind. All is mind. So from our mind, we create this entire hologram of the world. And so we are the creator and we are one with the other. There is no other. Everything is a mirror. We're all one. The law of three, we're going to go more in depth, speaks about the three forces in the universe that are needed to make anything happen. And we see this repeated in religion and philosophy. The law of sevens talks about the 7 planes in the universe. And so the law of one and the principle of mentalism, imagine it kind of like the circle. Within the circle is the triangle, which is the law of three, the forces that make the universe and the earth sort of rotate. And then the law of sevens are the aspects or the planes within that circle and that universe. So they're really collective in their teachings. They're not necessarily individual laws, but I kind of wanted to break them down. The law of ninefoldness has to do with raising consciousness, that there is an actual pattern and a direction in terms of raising consciousness. And because the Enneagram has 9 points, this is the order in which we raise consciousness in our lifetime. The law of rhythm states that everything is a cycle. You will go through the cycles of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 repeatedly until your last breath. And the law of polarity says that we swing from one direction to the next direction. We're going to talk about the base of the triangle, what's known as the 3-6, and how we tend to swing in these 2 directions. And that's sometimes where we get stuck and we fail to do deeper work and growth because we get stuck in this polarity. Any questions about that?
I have one about the law of rhythm. What did you say about it?
The law of rhythm is the best example is the seasons. The seasons are continuous. So spring, summer, fall, winter. The Enneagram also is rhythmic. You have a 1 year, a 2 year, 3 year, and so forth until you reach 9, and then you start over again with 1. So everything in the universe is cyclical and has a rhythm. And once you understand, when we start doing the practical numbers, when you understand your rhythm and your cycle and what happens with your numbers, you're going to see a pattern. You're going to see the cycle in your life so that you can get ahead of it and work towards making those more difficult or inner struggle years work in your favor rather than against you. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
So the law of one, again, it's about how the universe is all inclusive. And so the law of one is always viewed as a circle. In a moment, we're going to talk about cosmology and sort of how the universe was created, but it always starts with a circle. Everything having to do with a circle has to do with wholeness, has to do with God or the creator, the spirit or the soul, the universe. Everything falls within one. We are all one. There is no other in spirituality. And e pluribus unum is from many one and from one many. So it reminds us that we are all one. And so this law is the circle. In symbology, anytime you see a circle, it's always related to the all, the soul, the spirit, or the universe. So I want to just kind of use this in the astrology chart. So you've got a circle that is 360 degrees. If you split the circle in half, you have what's called an opposition. That would be your polarity. You tend to go in your behaviors all or none, 0 to 100, one extreme to the other. And the law of polarity states that we swing all the way to the right and we swing all the way to the left. So here, the opposition. Now I want you to pay attention to the math. 360 is 3 plus 6 is 9. 1 plus 8 is 9. 9 plus 0 is 9, and 4 plus 5 is 9. In astrology, when we have a square, what this is an internal conflict. Oppositions are external conflicts. We think that someone is doing something to us, but rather it's the universe mirroring back to ourselves this law. Whatever you judge in another or what conflict you have with another is indeed your conflict within yourself. And the square is an internal conflict, the dialogue that we have, which rules our thoughts. And we'll go into the numbers in a moment. And then if you even break down a square or 90-degree angle even more, you have a 45-degree angle, which is even further sort of separation from the one. So we're always in a circle. We are always in unity with the universe or our creator. It is our choices. It is the way we view the world, that law of the mind, of principle of mentalism, that we think someone is doing something to us. We think that our thoughts are accurate when really they just separate us. And that's why it's stated in the Quran, or the word kiklos, that it's a separating circle. This is what we do to ourselves. Now, because we're having a human experience, there is a pattern to our circle, and it's rooted in the Enneagram, in the numbers that we're going to see. And the point is that we're separated from the creator upon entering the body. And then as we live our life, we're supposed to be getting closer to the creator, coming back to this idea of one in wholeness. And the things that we need to work through in life, the inner struggle, are the thoughts and the conflicts that we create in our life. Does that make sense? So in mythology, there's something called the Trimurti. The Trimurti is from the Hindu philosophy, that there are three gods that represent the forces of the universe. These three gods are also three forces in our mind. We'll go into that in a little bit. This is similar to the Father, Son, Holy Ghost in Christianity. The Trimurti, the number three, the law of three, are the three forces in the universe that make anything happen. Without these three forces, nothing would be created in the universe. So we're going to visit that more. Joseph,
Frances?
Yes.
Sorry, just to back up to the last thing before I forget.
Sure.
I do have a question about the way you broke down the circle, and you went down and you said to a square and I guess 45 degrees, and then you break it down more, and that is more separating. Is that what you were saying? Like the more, like the smaller the angle gets, the more you're separating from God?
Exactly. The more you get separated and you get more inward into inner struggle and conflict. So the circle is wholeness. So you're one with the universe or one with your creator. The opposition that's linked to the law of polarity is that you think someone is doing something to you. So now you're separate from your fellow man, which would be ego and personality. Then the 90-degree as well as the 45-degree is an inner struggle, that your thoughts are separating you from others and your creator. So that's a great question. Yes, we get further and further away.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. So we're going to talk about Joseph and the Pharaoh. It's a famous Bible story of Joseph, who became king of Egypt because he interpreted a dream that Pharaoh was having of fat cows and skinny cows. And we'll go into that in a bit, especially with the numbers and where this mythology comes from. And that's for the number 7. And then the number 9 mythology is looking at the Hydra heads. This was a myth of Hercules, where he had to confront the Hydra that had 9 heads. And these are the deadly sins or passions or shadow aspects that we all have to confront in this life. Now, I will be using something from more modern Enneagram literature to discuss the deadly sins or the Hydra heads linked to each of the numbers, so that you know exactly which shadow aspect or which Hydra head or which vice or passion or deadly sin to work on during the year that you're at. So we'll get to that. And that's from more of the modern literature. So this is the symbol of Om. The symbol of Om is believed to be the same frequency or the vibration of the universe, which is 432 hertz. And it breaks down, if you go 4 + 3 + 2, you get 9. So again, we're going to see the number 9 repeated as the absolute sort of balance that we want to achieve using the Enneagram. The number 3 has to do with creation. The number 6 has to do with destruction. And the number 9 has to do with manifestation. This is also the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu. I mentioned earlier that there are 3 sort of mental energies in our mind. They're called Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. Rajas is the energy of action. There are specific years in your numerology where you need to take action. There are specific years where you should not take action. That is the point on the triangle. It relates to the number 6, and there are certain years that fall into that, will go in that, which is Tamas. Tamas is inertia, where you are to not do anything and rather see the growth of what you've worked towards during your Rajas years. And then Sattva has to do with the number 9, which is the balance. Now we are seeing the growth and starting a new cycle. So we see throughout mythology, philosophy, religion, this idea of 3, 6, 9. And we'll share a famous quote from Tesla, where he said, if you know the power of 3, 6, 9, you will have the kingdom to the keys to the kingdom of the universe. And so we see repeatedly 3, 6, 9, and I'll go more in depth in a bit about this. But when we chant Om correctly, Aum, what we're doing is we're calling in these energies, we're calling in the vibration of the universe so that all 3 forces within us can be used so that we can create the life that we want and get closer to the circle, to wholeness, to the creator, and to God. Any questions on that? Okay. So something I like to say is that there are 3 symbols that make up the entire universe: a circle, a triangle, and I usually say a square, but it's going to be a square, which is 4-sided or up to an octagon. So this happens to be the 6-sided figure that we're using with the Enneagram. But the entire universe, and we'll talk about cosmology in a moment and why I say that, can be broken down into a circle, which is spirit, the triangle, which is mind, always, thought, and then a figure that is 4-sided or up to 8 sides. And this represents the body. This is a 6-sided figure because I'm going to talk to you about the number 6, the importance of the number 6, specifically with Jesus, and what it means in terms of our inertia, in terms of our tamas, in terms of waiting to see, reaping what we sow. But these 3 symbols represent the entire universe, and I'll share the cosmology in a moment. So here's our circle. We start off intact before we incarnate. And we then are created with a thought. So here's the square, here's the pentagon, here's a rectangle, I'm sorry, here's the pentagon, the hexagon, the heptagon, and the octagon. With every turn that you go through the Enneagram, every 9 years, you're actually getting closer to becoming the circle. Look how close this octagon is to being a circle. You are being, like David, chipped away at the excess that is not you. What Gurdjieff said, those eyes that you are not, that ego, those masks, that persona, that personality that you relate to, that is not you. You are the divine, you are the soul. And so when we live in a life of divine will or ruled by our purpose or our soul, then we're more in alignment with our true self, and we get closer and closer to the symbolism of the circle. Now, we need lived experience to get crafted. So we start as an intact circle upon the belief or the thought of incarnation. We're birthed on a triangle that has to do with thought and intention, and we get slowly crafted and chipped away at as we go through the cycles of the Enneagram. Now here I put all of the numbers, and you add up the circle, the triangle, the rectangle, they all equal 9. We are always turning into the sacred. We are always turning into wholeness. We are always turning into that wise person. So with each turn of the Enneagram of all 9 cycles, you're just getting closer and closer to your true self, to your essence, and to the divine spark. Any questions?
I have 2.
Okay.
Okay, the first one is about the ohm. I think the diagram that you showed has like a 3, 6, and a 9. So then when you
Yes.
add it all up, it equals to 18, and then 8 plus 1 is 9. And that's why when you're chanting ohm, you're chanting to God. Did I get that right?
Yes, and you're going to see a lot about the number 369, and that we cannot create anything in the universe without the numbers 369. But yes, breaking it down to be the number 9 is accurate. And so if you look here, the 3 is sort of like the 3 here that has to do with our state of consciousness of waking. So when we say people are woke, the reality is being woke isn't an advanced state of consciousness. It's simply recognizing that my body is separate than yours. And so this is listed in the Upanishads, a famous text in the Hindu tradition. The number 6 has to do with the dream state. And that's over here, if you look at sort of this aspect of Om. And then this would represent the number 9, which is called Turiya, or the absolute state, which is what we're trying to achieve. So besides the breaking down of the number, Lisa, also what I'm trying to illustrate here is the symbol of 369, which will break down more and more, that it resonates with the symbol of Om and is the vibration of the universe. Did that help?
Yeah, gave me
Okay.
more information too, but I
You
appreciate
said
it.
you had a second question?
The second question had to do with the last diagram that you just were showing.
This one?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So then the numbers, I'm interested in that, and I don't quite know. I know that a circle is 360. So when all of these shapes, when you add up the angles, it comes out to those degrees. And
Correct.
then
This
when
is
you
the
add those
interior angle of each of these diagrams, and
Mhm.
they all add up to 9.
to that- okay,
So
got it.
when I say that there's 3 symbols in the entire universe, the circle represents the soul, the triangle represents your thought, and anything that has angles, like any of these, I usually say square when I teach, I do circle, square, triangle plus square equals circle. It's the same concept. Anything that is angular like here has to do with the body. So you've got mind, body, spirit. And so every time you work through your thoughts, which we're going to see in the numerology of 369, and you use the 3 forces of the universe, you're getting closer to being crafted into this circle, closer to your sort of perfect state or ideal state, which is union with the divine again. So as you own your thoughts and your desires, the triangle has to do with your thoughts, and any of these diagrams here have to do with your desires, has to do with the body. The body has desires and why we deem it unworthy. We're going to talk about the number 6 in a moment. Then you can get closer and closer to being whole with your soul and the divine. But yeah, this is just to illustrate that all of this, whether it's mind, body, or spirit, all equals 9, which is the divine number of the universe. Any other questions? Okay. So another thing about the number 9 and what makes it so special, the number 9 can be exchanged with the number 0. So this symbol here is from the Kabbalah, and it represents ayin and yesh. Ayin and yesh is a concept that nothing and everything are the same. So being empty is filled, being filled is empty. This symbol is from Buddhism, and it's called the Heart Sutra, and it has the same concept. Everything is nothingness. Form is empty, empty is form. And the purpose of this is, as humans, the sort of inner struggle that I mentioned earlier about the Sufism and Quran quote is that the inner struggle for the human being has to do with one thing. The one thing is the body. The one thing is the form. We are flawed. We are desirous. We have imperfections. We have judgments. And therefore, we believe that being in the form keeps us from God. And so the number 9 and the number 0 in numbers can be replaced and you get the exact same number. So if you have a 708 and a 798 and you bring this down to its root, you get a 6 in either one. And the concept is that form is the space that holds the soul or the divine or the universe. And so the universe needs the form in order to be represented and manifested. And if we can really understand this concept, instead of hating ourselves, instead of self-betraying, instead of this purification that we put our body through because it's so flawed and we go through a man cleanse, a food cleanse, an herbal cleanse, we'd actually really learn to love the form because it's the form that houses the soul and the divine spark. So Daniel Chanan Mott said, one should think of oneself as ayin and the absolute all, and at the same time, the absolute nothingness. They are the same. The person who learns to think about himself as ayin will ascend to a spiritual world where everything is the same and everything is equal. Life equals death, the ocean equals the dry land. The reality is that there is only one. So just because we have a form doesn't mean we're not defined. Just because we have flaws and imperfection doesn't mean that we don't deserve to take care of the vehicle and the form so that the divine has a dwelling. And this was a big teaching of Jesus and of Buddhas, that if you take care of the form, then the form can be everything and nothing all at once. And it's only in the form that we can actually do our spiritual work. Any questions about that? Okay, so let's get into some math and some philosophy. So Galileo said, the book of nature is written in the language of mathematics. And here are some other philosophers that had similar sort of concepts. Pythagoras, who's actually the one that we attribute the science of numerology to, said, numbers are the cause of gods and demons. And we're going to see how this is so true, in particular to the year that you're living in the Enneagram. There are going to be some really rock solid years where you're feeling really great about yourself, where you're feeling very powerful, active, energetic. You're out there getting things done. And there are going to be other years intentionally that is that inertia, that is that tamas, that we are just sitting there and we're judging ourselves because time is passing and we're not getting anything done. But it's the balance that is needed. And this is when we're also going to look at the demons in the sense of the sins that we can work through each time that we have a number each year. Einstein said, I am not interested in this phenomenon or that phenomenon. I want to know God's thoughts. The rest are mere details. And all of Einstein's theories were to connect the dots to see what patterns and information God left on this earth. He also said that God does not play dice with the universe. He didn't believe that things were random. He believed that there were cycles and patterns. And so his theories were to prove that we were here guided and that we indeed had a cycle and a pattern and a sacred geometry to our life. Baruch Spinoza said, God is not a personal manifestation, not one being, but rather a manifestation of everything that is harmonious. God is nature. We're going to see the number of nature in a moment in the sacred geometry, and that's what he's talking about. Again, there is a pattern here. We are nature. That means that we too have a pattern. This is not reserved just for pineapples and pine cones. Nikola Tesla, if you only knew the magnificence of 369, then you would have a key to the universe. And we're going to see that in the triangle and the significance of the triangle and the year specifically associated with 369 and the higher dimensions. And my guides say that the language of the universe is metaphysics, music, and mathematics. I know metaphysics. I know nothing about music and mathematics. But when I learned metaphysics, I understood the law of octaves, which is what this symbol is based on, and the way that we raise vibration. I also understood mathematics because of astrology and the way that the cycles unfold in our life. So these three are all related. So let's go through the mathematical sequence to break down this symbol. There's two aspects to this symbol. There's actually three. There's the circle. The circle is the wholeness that it's housed within. So that's the universe or the creator. Then there is a triangle. You can see the triangle, it stands out, and that represents 369. There are three forces in the universe that make everything happen: positive, negative, and neutral. This is the law of three. In Hinduism, we see this as Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu. In Christianity, we see this as Father, Son, Holy Ghost. In what are called the Mahagunas, or the mental forces, we see Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. The triangle is always thought. The triangle is always the law of mentalism. You are creating the world that you experience with these three numbers, with these three forces. And it's rooted in a level of vibration. However, 369, and we'll see that a little later, is directly related to the fourth dimension, or dimensions beyond the earthly 3D realm. So in this Enneagram, we have the higher dimensions, which allows us to reach higher consciousness through transmutation of thought, which is the triangle. We have the common 3D dimensions, which is our body, which is the hexagram. And then we have the circle, which houses all of it, which is the universe. And again, it's mind, body, spirit. So where do we get the sequence that we're going to go break down in the Enneagram? There's actually two sequences. The one I'm going to teach you both, but the one that we're going to use to track our cycles is this one. This sequence, if you take the seven, the number seven, the seven planes of the universe, and you divide 1 divided by 7, 2 divided by 7, 3 divided by 7, and so forth, you will find a sequence in the number pattern. 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7 is repeated. We never find 3, 6, and 9. So these numbers and this number pattern in numerology corresponds to the hexagram points of the Enneagram that have to do with the 3D dimension, that has to do with your body, that has to do with you being here on Earth. Your thought is going to be a higher dimension, and we'll see that with the triangle years. So this is going to be the pattern that we're going to use when we start tracking our years, and when we should act and when we should stay still. So when we should use our rajas, our action, which is the 3, you'll see that in a minute. When you use your tamas, which is inertia and just stand still and be, which is the 6. And then when it balances all together, when you're wrapping up a cycle, which is sattva at the 9 point. So we start to identify spiritual texts, for instance, like the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible, have all of these teachings, for instance, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It's not to say that if you're Christian and you believe in that story, it's that they understood that these are the 3 forces of the universe, just like in Hinduism with the Trimurti, just like in science, positive, negative, neutral. So we start to understand that the universe is mathematical. That's where we understand quantum physics down to like the smallest particles. So some examples of how this has sort of been calculated is cell division. If we do cell division, one cell divides into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8. We see the same pattern. 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, 1. We see this repeated no matter how much cell divides. If we do digital roots doubling 3, 3, 6, 3, 6, 3, 6 is the pattern that we see. And if you double 9, then you only get the number 9 repeated. So there's 3 sort of layers. 3, 6, 9 is linked to the higher dimension. And these numbers 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, which you're going to track in your numerology, are linked to your 3-dimensional life. That will be the inner struggle that you experience in your body in this lifetime to reach a higher dimension, which means transmuting your consciousness, raising consciousness, which is the function of a lifetime, and then reuniting with your creator based on your new consciousness level. So the 3, 6, 9 is the triangle, the thought that we need those forces in order to achieve a higher mentality, a higher consciousness and thought. The 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5 pattern is the body that has to do with the hexagram. And this is so when we reunite with our creator, we are whole and we have used the purpose of our lifetime to have this inner struggle in the body, change our thoughts to reunite with God. Does this make sense? The breakdown of how we're going to use these numbers. Okay. So the mathematical sequence we're going to get to in a minute, let me just repeat. 3, 6, 9 is always the forces working for higher consciousness. When we start plotting the years on your 3, 6, 9, those are going to be years of either action, rajas, tamas, or inaction or inertia, where you're going to feel you're not doing anything, but it's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And the number 9, which is closing a cycle to now start a new cycle with the number 1. So those years are going to be directly related to raising consciousness. So now you're going to have a pattern in how to use each year of your life to move in the appropriate direction. The years 1, 2, and 4, and we're going to go through this again, this is just the beginning, are linked to number 3 of the triangle. So 1, 2, and 4, which is on this side of the triangle, has to do with action, rajas. This is a time to go out into the world, to be the warrior, your masculine energy, to create, to plant seeds, to do something. That's linked to the creative energy force. Years 8, 5, and 7 in your numerology are linked to the number 6, which is this side of the triangle and this point right here. These are years of death. These are years of death and rebirth. You're basically waiting to see what you're reaping, what you sow. And it relates to Shiva or tamas, inertia. And then 9 years are balance years, where all of the previous cycles combine into the number 9. And you're going to see in a minute the number 9 is a master number in everything. And that relates to Vishnu, which is the god of balance or the neutralizer. So this is how we're going to start plotting our numbers when we get into the numerology. Any questions about that? Okay, so I want to, and I've said some of it, but now I kind of want to make it in order. I want to explain the Enneagram as a cosmology. Cosmology is how the universe was created. How did we get here? Every tradition, every philosophy, every mythology has a similar pattern, and it's exactly represented in the Enneagram. So I'm just going to use the Enneagram, but this is in any philosophy or mythology, you're going to see the same concepts. I'm going to pull a little bit from the Vedas or the Vedic philosophy. So the idea is that the universe is intact. It's all one, the law of one. There is no breaking point in the universe. Everything is intact. This intact energy you can call God. In the Vedas, it's known as Purusha. And this is an inactive energy. Nothing is happening. It's just in itself. Think of it like an egg that is perfectly intact. All of a sudden, that energy has a thought. And that thought is, I would love to experience myself. This is where we start to see creation. And this is where we start to see separation. The circle now turns into a triangle. God says, wow, I'd really like to see what I look like if I were to birth myself in the eyes of man. In the Vedas, we use Prakriti, which is the feminine energy. So out of Purusha, out of this perfect circle, the thought of, I want to create what you would perhaps call in this day and age an intention, is the triangle. That's why the triangle is always thought. And so that is what is created in nature. And then from there, the thought cannot be enough. It needs, because of the way that the elements are structured in the universe, ether, air is thought. Then we have fire, which is creation. Then we have water, which is sort of the emotion. And then the earth element, which is our bodies. That's where we get the hexagram. So within this symbol, the universe creation exists. The soul, or Purusha, the intact God that is just in perfect balance, no chaos, nothing but intactness, wants to experience itself. The triangle is created. That's thought. That's a higher dimension of thought. And then we need a body to experience both the thought and the soul. And that's represented in the hexagram, and where we find both our spiritual nature through the circle and our material nature through the hexagram image. Does that make sense? Why this symbol is so mystical? So you have one circle, which is the wholeness of the universe and the cosmos. This is the spirit that dwells within. You get one triangle, which is your thought, your level of consciousness. And the point of a lifetime is to raise consciousness so you can get closer to the divine. And then in this case, a six-sided figure, or any, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-sided figure. In this particular symbol, it's 6. And 6 is the number of the commoner. 6 is the number of the common man. I'm going to give you a lot of symbology around the importance of that. One of the reasons people do not like 6 years in numerology is because they're boring, because there's nothing to do. They're years of inertia. And a lot of us fail to create roots. A lot of us fail to create consistent habits because it's boring. Small steps are boring. We want something exciting. We want something fun. And you're going to see in the parable of the sower with Jesus in a moment. The number 6 is always the number of man. Yes, it's boring. Yes, it's stable. Yes, it's the commoner, but it's the thing that gives you consistency, behavior change, roots, and actually will lead you to the number 9, which is neutralizer stability, so that you can change. Any questions on that? Okay, so I said the circle, the creator wanted to experience himself. The thought creates the triangle, which is our mind, and then the thought or the mind creates the earth or the hexagram, which is the body. So let's talk a moment about the triangle. The triangle has 3 forces. The triangle is the strongest force on earth. It's one of the reasons why we're so awed by the pyramids. And so the numbers 3, 6, 9 in the universe are related to higher consciousness. The only way to raise consciousness is to raise the consciousness or the perspective or the belief around your limiting thoughts. So on 3 years, one of the shadow aspects of a 3 year, even though it's an action year and people really like a 3 year because it's stimulating and fun, is that we might be seeking a savior. So rather than a savior, we perhaps become a challenger or find someone that challenges us. The 6 year is more of a negative year, or we view it that way because it's a bit boring, and we might feel that we're a victim. But rather, we can change our mindset and think of it as a creator year, that we're reaping what we sow. And the 9 year is an endings year. It neutralizes all of the previous 8 years. And it's here where something dies in us, or we have an ending and something begins anew. And we consider ourselves perhaps a coach or a teacher in something that we've learned. So we're going to see this pattern repeated in our cycles.
Francis, you said that it the 9 neutralizes the what years?
The 9 neutralizes all of the years. If you add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8, you get 9.
Oh, the 8 years. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, the
Add
8 years prior. That's why it represents in tarot the Hermit. The Hermit card is a wise man leaving the past and moving now with a new level of consciousness into a new beginning. Now, there is some death rebirth during those years. There's oftentimes endings, we're leaving something behind, but it is actually a neutralizer year from what you plotted out in 3-6. So if we stay in a 3-6 cycle, then we're stuck in that opposition or that law of polarity, victim, savior, victim, savior, victim, savior. If we don't know how to let go of something in the 9. So we can actually use the 3-6-9 years to grow. That's the point of the 3-6-9 years, is if we plot them and we know, we can actually eliminate victor savior archetype and actually neutralize that and become what I call the perpetrator or the coach or the teacher, because now we've learned something and we raised vibration. Does that make sense?
yes.
Great. So we have to talk about the number 6. The number 6 in this particular symbol, it's a hexagram, is a 6-sided figure. The number 6 is related to the common man. In astrology, it's the house of Virgo. So let me kind of give you a little bit about Jesus. Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary. And the concept was that he was born in MP. MP means materia prima, or raw material, prime matter. It's kind of like land that you can plant anything on. In a moment, I'm going to share with you the parable of the sower, where he talks about the seeds. So the metaphor of Jesus being born by the Virgin Mary is actually about Virgo. And Jesus was a common man, born in a manger. He couldn't get a room at the inn. He wore sandals. He washed the feet of his disciples. What he was mirroring to us was, it is through our commonness, our ordinariness, that we actually can raise consciousness, the 3-6-9, and become one with God, which is unification of the body, the mind, and the spirit. So this is about the seeds to be planted. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is translated as the house of bread. Bread has to do with wheat, has to do with grain, it has to do with seeds. And so he's constantly teaching us within the metaphysical text of the Bible that you're going to reap what you sow. And so the 6 is a very, very important year to start realizing a change in direction before you get to a 9 year. So now you're going to have to work on this side of the triangle, and we'll get to that. It also has to do with purification, taking care of the body. The Jewish star, you can see, has the triangle up and the triangle down. This is the balance of energies. The pointed down triangle has to do with the feminine, so that Prakriti, and the triangle up with the Purusha, the masculine, the creation of the universe. So the triangle, again, we see balanced here. This is the 4th chakra. Of all the chakras, the only chakra that has the triangles both up and down, masculine, feminine, is the heart chakra, because that's the chakra of balance, and it's loving thy neighbor, everything that Jesus taught. This is a mandala. It's called the Sakana Yantra. And what it represents is, again, you see the triangle here, and it's a meditation between man and God. So nobody likes the number 6 in numerology. It's a stabilizer year. It's a boring year. It's a common year. In astrology, it's the most boring house. It rules Virgo, the day in and day out, the donkey, the commoner. There's no excitement, but it is working the body. It is purification of the body, the dwelling of the soul that then raises consciousness, which is the triangle, which gets us closer to the divine, which is the circle. So the importance of the hexagram is indeed the inner struggle that happens only in the body, only in a incarnation. You cannot raise consciousness and you cannot burn karma out of the body. You need a physical form. And that's why this is so important, the figure being a 6-sided figure. Any questions on the symbology of the circle, the triangle, and the hexagram?
I just don't see the hexagram.
It's this weird 6-pointed figure. So you see
Okay,
the
that's
triangle and you see the
yeah.
circle, all those other weird little things, that's a
Okay.
6-pointed figure, yeah. So it's not like in a traditional hexagram, but that's what we call it because it's 6-sided, but it's specific for the Enneagram. And you're gonna see how the years are gonna build on one another using that numerical mathematical code. So let's talk a little bit about sacred texts and where we find these numbers and these teachings as well. So first, the Bible. In Matthew 13, Jesus talks about the seeds. He says that some seeds fall along a path. He says that some seeds fall on rocky places with no soil. This is somebody who doesn't have roots, somebody who doesn't do the work of the common man, the day in, the day out, the stabilization, the constant sort of consistency of a spiritual practice, for instance. That's what he's relating to in terms of people whose seeds fall on no soil. Other seeds fall among thorns and choke the plants. These people live too worried with life. These are the shadow aspects of these numbers, and we'll get to that in a moment. If you're constantly worrying and thinking and thinking and thinking, which is the meaning of the number 3, then you're not trusting, you don't have faith. You're not putting things into place so that you can reap what you sow. And then he says, all other seeds fell on good soil and produced a crop 60 or 30 times bigger. And you see again, 3, 6, and 9. So it's only with the balance of these 3 energies that you actually reap what you sow, that you can actually raise consciousness, that what you're planting will sow fruit or will give you something at the end of your lifetime or through the cycles that you're producing. The second parable he spoke of was the parable of the yeast. And he said the kingdom, so we're talking here about the circle, right? Returning to heaven, is like yeast. Yeast has to do with the number 6. Yeast has to do with grain, it has to do with the commoner. That's why he was born in Bethlehem, the house of bread. And the woman took and mixed 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough. You cannot achieve the kingdom of heaven, whatever you see that as, if you do not work your karma through your body. If you do not burn that karma, if you do not sow those seeds, if you do not have a consistent practice, be it spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, it is the consistency, the day in, the day out, the ordinariness of being human that is what's going to bring you to the kingdom. And yet nobody wants that aspect of it. Instead, what we do is we destroy the body. We hate the body. We drink too much, we eat too much. We engage in really unhealthy practices. And then we beat ourselves up through the body because we have a body that's limited and flawed. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you say constant practice, is it the needing to have discipline towards the one thing, or is it just that you're always doing something spiritual or movement? Could you just explain a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a couple of spiritual practices at the end, but that's actually a really good question. In this particular class, I'm recommending embodiment practices. Gurdjieff would teach sacred dances, and I'll share that with you at the end. There's a lot of noise. If someone can take off their microphone. But what I tell students in terms of spiritual renewal is something you choose every single day. So if we're talking about a spiritual practice, not only in the body, like eating well or looking at our thoughts or sacred dances or some sort of physical practice, spiritual renewal, which is a constant choice to choose your soul, to be ordinary and have a spiritual discipline. And my personal philosophy has three things. That one is every day you read something contemplative, something that makes you think, that maybe another person wrote. It doesn't have to necessarily be a spiritual text. It could be a quote that you ponder. The second thing is that you have reverence to some practice. So one of the things that I see a lot is people that are doing 5, 10 different things, and they don't stick to a reverence of one specific practice. It's best that you go deep. It's best that you pick one practice and you go deep with that and you get really into that reverence of that particular thing so that you can really get good at that specific practice and the reverence to it. And the third, in my opinion, is a confrontation of your shadow every single day. For me, what I teach students, those three pieces are extremely important for a spiritual renewal daily, choosing this path. And in addition, at the end of the lecture, towards the end, when I talk about spiritual practices, I'll mention embodiment as well, because Gurdjieff was big on the sacred dances and the Sufi whirling dervish dances. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. On the reverence of one practice, is that so? If you were going to use meditation as one practice, I guess when you say to go deep into it, is it just having the dedication, or is something like meditation not considered a deep practice?
Meditation is a deep practice. However, in my model, meditation is the 10th truth on a spiritual path.
Okay.
So if you're going to meditate, I need everyone to take off their microphone, please. If you're going to meditate, first look at the quality of your thoughts. If you don't know why certain things are showing up in meditation, where these thoughts come from, then it's going to be very difficult to disassociate from those thoughts and just let them go. So first, before meditation, which is truth 10, is truth 1, which is truth of thoughts, where your thoughts come from. What are you thinking? Why do you have negative thoughts? Why do you have limiting thoughts? What are they doing to you in terms of making choices in your life, holding you back? So that, I would say, needs to be sort of piggybacked with the meditation practice. And that could be perhaps journaling or some of the practices that I offer that I'll share towards the end. But I would say beyond meditation is identifying the quality of your thoughts and where they come from, because that's going to be directly related to your body. Your thoughts dictate what happens in your body. The body is the loyal servant to the thoughts. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I might ask about the third one. You said that's taking in. What was the third one? It's sort of like taking inventory. Is that like doing your TED or something of that nature?
The third is your shadow. The third is looking at your shadow. So one of the things I did take for tonight's lecture on modern Enneagram literature is the vices. And I'll share with you shortly. So you don't have to specifically only look at that vice in the year that you're in, but every number on the Enneagram has a shadow aspect. And so looking at your shadow daily, confronting your shadow daily, seeing what you judge, seeing what unconscious aspects show up in your sphere of consciousness so that you can perhaps journal or meditate on where they come from or what they're mirroring back to you. So that's the 3-prong approach I teach students for spiritual renewal. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I guess I keep thinking maybe don't do that right before bed. So I don't, think too much about my shadow before bed. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, some people will say that, but then again, if you dream and you're lucky enough to dream and have a, sort of the dream state mirror back to you, then that's pretty lucky. I don't dream. So there's a lot of symbolism that comes through from shadow and unconscious aspects in your dream state. That's a personal choice. I don't think there's anything right or wrong as to when to do shadow work, but the ongoing looking at the shadow, I do stuff in the morning. My morning hours are the time where I dedicate to my reverence and my practice, but whatever works for you is appropriate. There's no right or wrong. So the next text, yes.
Before we go on, I was looking at the numerology, and so I was looking at the hexagram, and to me that all added up to 1. And then I was looking at the triangle, the 3, 6, 9, and that added up to 9. And then those two together is 10, which is 1. I don't know if you spoke on that or
Well,
if you
1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, all of the, and I'll get to that in another slide, all adds up to 9. Yeah. And so when you have, let me just take you back a bit.
Oh, I think I had an extra 1. It adds up to 9.
To 9,
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so they both add up to 9.
They add up to 9, exactly, because that's the number, that's the sacred number. And then you'll see in the cycles. That's why it responds to Vishnu or the neutralizer. That's when we can actually raise consciousness.
Okay, I got it. Thanks.
So you're welcome. In the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, so the Mahabharata is a big epic Hindu text, and there's a big war, and the Bhagavad Gita is sort of part of that. The actual war lasted 18 days, so we see the 9. The remaining soldiers left after the war were 18. Again, we see the 9. And in the Gita, there are 18 chapters. So we see this recurrence of the number 9 symbolically in these sacred texts, sort of woven into the philosophy, because a lot of these texts were hermetic. They were sort of hidden in the language. So when we start pulling them out, we see the repetition of these numbers and the symbols. Any questions before we go on to the sacred geometry? Okay, so the sacred geometry, Galileo Galilei said, the universe cannot be read until we have learnt the language and become familiar with the characters in which it is written. It is written in mathematical language. The letters are triangles, circles, and other geometrical figures, without which means it is humanly impossible to comprehend a single word. So the universe is not literal. The universe is symbolic, it's mathematical, it has a shape, it has a pattern, it has a symbol. Your life is actually sacred geometry. And plotting the cycles of your life in this symbol will show you your particular language of your soul. And so I always say it's a triangle plus square equals circle. So thought plus the body equals the unified consciousness or the higher vibration. And so he's saying a similar thing. So this particular figure resembles exactly what he's saying. Triangles, circles, and other geometrical figures, in this case, the hexagram. So this is an example of sacred geometry in nature. A flower, 2 of the numbers, and they're closely related in nature, are the Fibonacci spiral and the golden ratio. And what it refers to is symmetry. There is symmetry in nature, and you're going to see in the Enneagram, there's symmetry in your life, in your cycles. And if you start to track the right side of the Enneagram and the left side of the Enneagram, you actually will see mirror images. One is active, one is passive. One side is masculine, one side is feminine. One side is that Rajasic active energy, and the other is more of an inertia Tamas energy. So we in our lives are also sacred geometry. We also have symmetry, even though we don't know because we have perhaps not written it out. So sacred geometry is considered an ancient science that explains and explores the energy patterns that create and unify all things and reveals the precise way that the energy of creation organizes itself. And that's a key word there, organizes. Nothing in your life is random and chaotic, it's organized. It is believed that every natural pattern of growth or movement comes back to one or more geometric shapes, and humans are no different. Now we're talking about energy patterns. So unless you do some work, unless you start stringing this along, then you may not know. So like when I read the Akashic records, what I'm doing is I'm reading a person's energy pattern, and it's lifetime after lifetime after lifetime of energetic patterns of choices that they have made. So when they ask a question, is it, in my highest interest to do XYZ thing? What we're doing is trying to perhaps change a pattern so they can have a different result from what they've done before. And why Einstein says you can't solve a problem from the same state of consciousness that in what it was created. So our soul, our energetic pattern, our sacred geometry has patterns that have existed lifetime after lifetime. And so if we want something to change, it is those numbers of the hexagram. It is that common number 6. It is that day in and day out of planting those seeds, of watering the seeds, of the stabilization, the consistency that is going to change the energetic pattern of our life. So we may not identify it until we write it out the way that I hope you'll do after tonight. So the Sufi Enneagram embodies the science of numbers, letters, and geometry. It corresponds to the sciences of alchemy, astrology, cosmology, medicine, psychology, art, and architecture. This particular Enneagram, or this mystical symbol, is believed to have the answers to everything, like Gurdjieff stated. Any questions about sacred geometry? Okay, so let's recap the anatomy of the Enneagram. You've got the circle. This is your soul. This is going to be your life story, because what you're aiming to do is leave the physical world eventually. And what you do within the hexagram and the triangle will lead you to the plane of the universe upon which you will go after you leave the physical form. The triangle has to do with the mind. You have positive thoughts and you have negative thoughts. You have low vibration thoughts and you have higher vibration thoughts. The point of the triangle, the point of the 369 being a higher dimensional energetic figure, is so that you can transmute, raise consciousness, change your beliefs around your limiting thoughts. That's where those points really come into play. And then the hexagram represents the body. The body houses the desires, the passions, and the emotions. We cannot have that inner struggle without constantly looking our desires and passions, or the vices and sins, which we'll talk about in a moment, and shifting our emotions, our emotional reactions. If we are always reacting emotionally, if we are always giving into our desires, our vices, our passions, our sins, then we are not going to change our consciousness in the mind. And therefore, our consciousness, once we leave the physical form, is going to go to one of the lower planes in the universe. So it is this inner struggle, as I stated at the beginning, of fighting these emotions or balancing them, or putting boundaries, or not reacting to everything, or using free will and choice, limiting the desires and the vices that you give into. That struggle is what transmutes your consciousness through the triangle, which leads you to a higher plane in the universe upon death. So quickly, I just want to talk about astrology and astronomy, since that Sufi comment did mention that all of these arts and sciences are involved. So in the stars, Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, and the planet Saturn actually meet every 20 years. The number 20 we see throughout symbology and mythology. For instance, Odysseus was away for 20 years. The number 20 in the Bible is a number of waiting. So we have to wait. We have to have various cycles of a lifetime over and over, repeating patterns. For instance, maybe you make the same mistake over and over, kind of like Groundhog Day, before you actually start understanding your pattern in your cycle. That's sort of built into this period of 20 years. Jupiter in Greek mythology dethroned his father Saturn. And Jupiter overtook Saturn in its orbit. Jupiter in the story of the Pharaoh is linked to the fat cows, and the Saturn are the skinny cows. And I'll share that with you for a moment. So when they started designing the Enneagram, you can see that they started with the overlap every 20 years. And what they understood was 20, 40, 60. If you chop off this bottom piece, you end up with the Enneagram. So in astrology or in astronomy, this relationship between Jupiter and Saturn and the meeting of the two equals the number 5. Jupiter goes around the zodiac 12 years. Every 7 years, Saturn has a cycle. And if you separate that or subtract that, you get the number 5. So just like the number 6 is the number of man, the commoner, number 5 is the number of growth. It has to do with the Fibonacci spiral. It has to do with that sacred geometry of growing. It's how the fruit starts to get its curvature and growth. And this is how we start to get our growth. So with these cycles, on year 5, lucky me, I'm on a year 5 this year, we get growth, we learn to use free will, and it's a year of individuation. I'm going to talk more about the number 5 in a moment. Any questions on this? Okay. So in the story of Joseph and the Pharaoh was having a dream, and he was seeing these 7 fat cows get eaten by 7 skinny cows. So he heard that Joseph was interpreted dreams, and Joseph explained to him that there were going to be 7 years of bumper crops and grain, and then there were going to be 7 years of famine. And it was because Joseph was able to interpret this dream for Pharaoh that Egypt was able to plan for the years of famine. And then nobody felt any hardship during those years because they had stored away grain for the times of the skinny cows. So Jupiter represents the fat cows in the story, and Jupiter is eaten every 7 years by Saturn, and the result is 5. 5 is the number of man. If you've ever seen Da Vinci's Vitruvius Man drawing, the number of man, it has to do with the 5 elements. The number 5 has to do with individuation. That means using our fire appropriately to make choices, leaving the low consciousness of the family and becoming an individual with free will and choice. The number 5 has to do with growth and abundance. It also is linked to the Fibonacci spiral, that curvature of the growth of the fruit. 5 on the Enneagram, if it's one of your 5 years, there is a year of growth. The number 5 is linked to the sun. Here's the sun glyph. So you become the sun of your solar system. And 5 is the number of fire, learning to use your fire appropriately. So what this is saying is when you're having fat cow years, and you'll see that in the description of each year, store something away for the Saturn years that are coming. There are going to be positive years and there's going to be negative years. The more you put aside in terms of your spiritual growth, your spiritual practice, you're changing your thoughts, you're learning to use your fire, your Saturn cycles, or the 7-year, for instance, is a skinny cow year in the numerology, is going to be easier for you. So once you start to learn to track your cycles and you identify, oh, this is going to be a good year. For instance, Jupiter is a 3 here. A 3-year is great. A 5-year is great, but a 7-year is not great. So the more work I do, the more grain, so to speak, going back to the number 6 in terms of being common and ordinary and sort of reaping what I sow, the more I put forth now, the less my skinny years are going to be so painful. It's going to be less of a struggle. So this story in the Bible is about putting forth our spiritual work, looking at our thoughts on years that things are growth, that years are really going good for us, and not using those years or wasting those years, but rather putting away for a rainy day. Does that make sense? And I'll get to which are the fat and skinny cows in a moment. Okay. So using the Enneagram for spiritual growth. Numbers dictate, but you choose. This is super important. You are going to have a number every year, from your birth year to your death year, every year. But there is a spiritual concept called free will that is linked to the number 5 and the use of your fire and choice. Nothing in the spirit realm, nobody can make a choice for you. And so you have free will. That is a spiritual law. The spirit realm cannot mess with your free will. So you can be given a 5-year, for instance, and do nothing with it. You can be given a 6-year and do nothing with it. It is your choice to do the work. You're going to be given some level of struggle, let's say if it's a 6 or a 7-year, but how you work through that. Do you check your shadow? Do you check your desires, your passions, limit your emotional reactions? If you don't, then you're just sort of letting the numbers dictate, but you're also making the choice to be passive. And so that's why, even though every single person has sacred geometry and has a pattern, the element of choice, the element of free will, how we make choices and use our fire, is the only element we are in control of. That is a personal decision, and there's no wrong or right, but perhaps the more you choose appropriate higher consciousness choices, deeper spiritual work and reverence, deeper shadow work, then the growth in it, when you leave the body and resume back to that circle, a higher plane of consciousness, a higher level of consciousness, more karma burned in a lifetime, is what you're working for. And that really is something that each individual chooses. So what are the number meanings? I'm going to share with you the shadow in a moment. 1 years are beginnings. Because you've just finished an ending year, the years 9 and 1 tend to overlap. You end things in a 9-year and you begin new things in a 1 year. 2 years are linked to harmony and they can be conflictive. I'll share with you in another slide. 3 years have to do with change. So this is the Rajas energy. This is the creator energy. This is that action, that active sort of, energy that we have in our mind. 4 years are crisis years. This is a skinny cow year. 5 years are growth. 6 years are resistance years. We tend to feel that we're wasting time. Things are stable. Things are boring. This is linked to the mental energy of tamas, which is Shiva, which is things sort of grew and now they're at a standstill and now the inertia sets in until we get to a 9-year and we balance it. A 7-year is a skinny cow year. You go inward. It tends to be a year of solace or contemplation, or perhaps loss or loneliness. An 8-year is a power year. It tends to be a fat cow year. It tends to be a year where you feel a lot of self-love, self-worth, power. Maybe you speak up for yourself. Maybe you go out and go actively seek something that you've been wanting to create or build. And then again, the 9-year is an ending. And this is the addition of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 equals 9. Here we have our neutralizer. This is our Vishnu. This is our Sattva. Sattva means purity and truth. So after one full cycle, you now have, and I'll show you in when I drew out all the numbers, you now have the foundation for every other remaining 9 years. Now, you may not remember your first 9 years of life. That's okay. The older you get, you have the next 9 and the next 9 and the next 9. So you're going to start seeing patterns. And I just created one very simple one so you could see in my own life. Now, this is the mathematical sequence. This is going to be how you're going to track your inner struggle, how you're going to track your pattern, your sacred geometry of your soul. You're going to go 1 leads to 4, leads to 2, leads to 8, leads to 5, leads to 7, and leads back to 1. These are the inner struggle years. 1, 4, and 2 are related to Rajas. They're action years. 8, 5, 7 are Tamas, and they're related to just being, or what we might think of stagnation years. So for instance, I'm in a 5-year. There's nothing for me to do. Last year was a crisis year. I had a lot to create and construct. Now I'm just waiting to see it grow. So it's not a negative thing. It's just each year is built on another. And you'll see the sequence in a moment. I'm going to show you with the years of the calendar. So the only element you're in control of is fire. Fire is the element of choice. When the universe is created, it starts with ether or Akash. It leads to air, which is your thoughts. It leads to fire, which is your choice, the only one you're in control of. It leads to water, which are your emotions, and then your body, which is earth. You do not have an ability to change your thoughts, your emotions, or your desires without fire. So the only element that you're in control of is fire, which is choice. That's why I said numbers dictate, but you choose. So 1 and 4 are going to be built on one another. And here I have light, and then I'm going to show you the shadow. So you begin a new cycle in a year 1, and then year 4 is directly related to building what you started in year 1. Then based on what you built in year 1 will lead to harmony in year 2. In harmony in year 2 leads to you feeling very powerful, maybe financially or self-worth in year 8. Year 8 power leads to growth, specifically spiritual, but other financial as well, in year 5. Year 5 growth leads to an inwardness or a solitude in year 7. And then that inwardness leads to a new beginning in year 1. Remember, these are only the numbers linked to the hexagram. These are only the numbers linked to the body. 3, 6, and 9 are linked to the mind. And I'll explain in a minute for each year, but this is the pattern that you're going to track for the inner struggle. Now, the shadow, yes.
So they're not consecutive, or they are? It's a little confusing. I'm sorry. So like 4 leads to 2, 1 leads to 4.
1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, 1. That's why I started earlier with the pattern. If you divide 1 divided by 7, 2 divided by 7, this is the pattern that you get. So this is the pattern of how the soul unfolds using the Enneagram. And I'll show you in years in a moment.
Okay.
Okay. But this is the pattern. Now you're going to live your life 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But when you plan it out, when you plot it out on the Enneagram, you're not going to be consecutive. You're going to see what you did in a 1 year is now building when you're at a 4. The 4, you look back at what you did at the 2. The 2 feeds into the 8. So you can start to weave the sacred geometry of your story. So this is the same number code. However, it's now linked to the shadow. So at 1, you begin a new cycle, but instead of construction, let's say you have a crisis. And then from that crisis, that leads to conflict in year 2, that should be harmony. In conflict, now this links to 8 rather than power, that you're speaking up for yourself or owning your power or making good choices. Now perhaps you have an excessive desire for power and you're power hungry or envious and lustful. Then an 8 year leads to greed in year 5. So rather than growth, now we're looking at a passion or a deadly sin of greed. That greed can lead to, instead of inwardness where you're doing contemplation, a depression. And then that depression leads to a loss in year 1, because 1 and 9 tend to deal with losses. So you get to choose the level of consciousness, 3, 6, 9, at which you live out your hexagram years. This is not determined for you. Your level of consciousness is inherited at the moment of conception, but your choice, your fire, your free will, at any time you can choose, like the Pharaoh and Joseph, to store for a rainy day. That is free will. That is not in the stars. That is on you. So that is why we are not victims, because we have the power to choose. Now, at any point in this cycle, you can shift. You can decide, I don't want to be greedy. I want to really look at my shadow aspects, at my vices, at my hydra. And then that can start to shift the cycle. You always get that right. But I just wanted to mirror for you the light pattern versus the shadow pattern. So Ichazo and Naranjo took the Enneagram literature, and they are 2 of the leaders in what is known as modern Enneagram, the psychological Enneagram, you know, the challenger and the mediator and all of those that you might know. So what I borrowed from their literature was the passions linked to each number. So what you can do is, during each year that you're in, you can look at, and we all have each of these. We all have every vice, every deadly sin, or every hydra head. We all have all of them. There are some that you're going to have more than others. So for instance, I'm in a 5 year. I'm going to look at avarice this year. And because it's a growth year, it would make sense that I could lead over to tip over to greed. So if you do your work and you're making choices for your spiritual health, you can use the vices of the Enneagram, the passions of the Enneagram, to see what shadow work to do during that particular year. So like I said before, if you're doing a spiritual reverence, if you're contemplation and you're confronting your shadow on a daily basis, this would help you identify perhaps that year which hydra head or which shadow to confront. This is just an added aspect to it. Any questions? Okay, so now let's calculate your numbers. Your story is sacred geometry and has a pattern. Your story is a symbol, which is your life. Your entire life is a symbol. Your entire life is a manifestation of your choices, of your energetic pattern that is in the stars, that is in your energy, that is in your soul, that is in your mind. So you are sacred geometry. That means that you have symmetry, that you have a pattern. And calculating your yearly numerology will start to unfold your sacred geometry and your pattern for you. So everybody this year is in 2022. Okay, so everybody's in a 6. 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 2 is a 6. So take your birth month and your birthday and add them all together, and it should boil down between 1 and 9. So my 2022 is a 6. I'm born in March is a 3. I'm born on the 14th is a 5. 6 plus 3 plus 5 is 14. 1 plus 4 is 5. I'm in a 5 year. Now, rule of thumb, this tends to start on January 1st. So everybody, being that it's January 19th, is already in their new number year for 2022. However, one of the things that I tend to see is that the energy gets much stronger around our birthday. So I happen to be born in March, so it's very early, but if your birthday's in November, you might still be lingering, let's say you're a 4, until closer to November, where then you pick up your 5-year. So just understand that later in the year is maybe when you're going to start feeling the shift in the energy. But it does start on the first of the year every year. Now your years are consecutive. So I was in a 4-year last year, I'm in a 5-year next year, I'm in a 6-year. So that part is consecutive. So you can always know the energy of the year you're in. You can always know what hydra or what passion to look at, but then you're going to have to do a little calculating in identifying your symbolic pattern or sacred geometry with what I'm going to show you. So this is the number sequence we're using. I am in a 5-year. I need to go back to an 8-year to see what I'm sort of reaping, what I sow, what seeds I planted. So in 2016, I got Cancer. And in 2022, I'm now really getting the lessons from that Cancer experience. It's always going to be, for the most part, a 7-year cycle, which is skinny cows. But if you follow this sequence, and I'm going to give you an example in the next slide with the years, you're always going back to what you sort of planted in the previous hexagram sequence. So this is your sequence, 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, 1. So here's an example. This is what I did here. So for all of us, 2022, 2016, 2010, 2003, 2000. Everybody has this sequence for the last 5. You may have a different number. I just happen to be in a 5-year. So I went back to an 8-year, which is over here. So in 2016, then I go back to a 2-year, which was 2010. Over here, I can see what happened in 2010. Then I go back to a 4-year, and I had 2003, I got divorced. And in a 1-year, which was in the year 2000, and I had a baby. So if I plot out my years according to the sequence, I can start to see my inner struggle, what my sacred geometric pattern of my soul is. Now, where does the 369 come in? The 369 is how you're going to use the energy. In a 3-year, you're going to be active. In a 6-year, you're going to be passive. And in a 9-year, you're going to neutralize. And I'm going to use a part of my model at the end. Any questions? Now, I start here 1 because this is a year I'm born. So you're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and etc. Yes, someone has a question? Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Wait, I didn't hear you, Lisa.
Yeah, because of my concussion, I can't really look at what you're doing at all with the person.
I'm going to send you the slides, and you can always, when you're feeling better, you just send me a text and I'll help walk you through it. Don't worry about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Francis, I'm
Yes.
I'm a 9. So where do I follow into it? Like this year is a 9 for me. So there's no 9 there.
What do you
On
mean?
the top, on the formula.
Okay,
On the
so
1, 4, 2.
a 9 is a neutralizer year. So what you're doing is you're balancing the energies from the 3s and from the 6. So what tends to happen is in 3 years, we get very active. And in 6 years, we get, let's say, lazy. So we tend, this is one of the things that I mentioned earlier about the law of polarity. The law of polarity states the swing to the right is the swing to the left. If we stay swinging between positive and negative, positive and negative, positive and negative, our life is simply going to be what I call these 0 to 100 swings, all or nothing, all or nothing, all or nothing. A 9-year is the opportunity to go back to the past 3-year and 6-year and see what you started, what you ended or stabilized, and what you need to neutralize now. And I'm going to actually, in this last piece of the spiritual practice, I'm going to give you an example for using my model.
So let me ask you a question. You said a little while ago. So let's say, for example, 2022, I'm a 9. So 2023, I'm going to be a 1, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so just to keep that sequence, right? So,
Exactly.
but
So you'll do 23 and then
Correct.
you'll go back 7, 5, 8, 2, 4, 1. Exactly.
correct. But on the years that are 3, 6, and 9, right? Because eventually we're all going to land on those, correct?
Correct. Okay.
We
so
just do
there's two things going on here. Okay.
correct.
First is everybody is going to have a year from 1 to 9, right?
Correct.
So you're a 9. That's what this year is. It's about neutralizing. Let me just take you back. It's looking at your sloth or your laziness, and it has to do with endings right here, right? So that's for everybody. Every single number, 1 to 9, has a hydra or passion to look at. Everyone's going to have a number based on their year and their birthday, and everybody's going to have a theme. The second part, which is for our spiritual growth, is this cycle. So if you're in this cycle of the hexagram, then what you're doing is you're tracking these years in this order, 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, 1. You're going to track that pattern. But since you're in a 9, you're going to track your thoughts from 3, 6, 9. What did you do in 3 that you were active? What did you do in 6 that you were stable or not lazy, but sort of inactive? And how can you balance those in this year to neutralize? So there's 2 things going on. Your year, everybody's going to do with their birth year, and there's something to look at from the shadow. And then tracking your cycles, which leads to your inner struggle. These 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7 have to do with the body. Remember the hexagram. 3, 6, and 9 have to do with raising consciousness. So you're in a cycle of ability to raise consciousness right now. I'm in a body struggle, inner struggle because of a 5-year. Does that make sense? There's 2 things going on.
Correct. No,
Okay.
so yes. For the 3, 6, 9, on the years that we have 3, 6, 9, this does not apply.
No, you go back to 3 and you go back to 6.
To 6. Got it.
So for
Okay.
instance, if let's just say right here, this was 2022, you would go back to 6, I don't know, 2018, and then you would go back to 3, 2015, let's say. So at 2015, for instance, you started something. At 2018, you stabilize, and now at 2022, how can you conjoin those together to neutralize and start something new?
May I
Got
ask
it.
a question? I'm sorry.
Yes.
So I just, for Claire, I know I'm just gonna have to rewatch this again, which is great. But so 2 is a body year, correct? And
Yes,
2,
all of these are body years. 3, 6, 9 is triangle mind years. Yes.
and then when you went back to see the numerology of the year, what that meant. So 2 would be right after. I just want to make sure. I think looking at that and then looking at the 1, 4, 2, 8 that's where I'm kind of stuck. But
So are you in a 2-year now, Suzanne?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you're going to go back to your 4-year. A 4-year is a crisis and construction year. Whatever
Okay.
you did in a 4-year, and you'll have to calculate your birthday, I don't know your year, is going to directly relate to harmony and conflict for this year. So you're always going back. One of the metaphors I use is what you buy at the store in the morning is what you eat for dinner. It's the same idea. We go back to see what we're eating now. You're reaping what you sowed.
So it would be going back 2 years then, correct?
No, your previous 4. So for instance, if I was in a 2, let's just say it's a 19, I would go back here to 2012. It's always 7 years.
Okay, it's always 7 years. Okay.
Correct. The skinny
So
cow.
1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, and 1 represent 7 years, correct?
That's correct. You're always going back 7 years, which represents skinny cows.
So, and then on the original, the slide that you just went to, where you went 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1 is a beginning, 2 is harmony.
So you're in a 2-year now?
Yes, it looks that way.
Okay, so you're in harmony. So there's 2 things going on. There's your annual year. Most people just do that. They calculate their birthday. They say, oh, I'm in a 2-year, it's relationships, and that's it. This is deeper. This is soul work. So if you want to know your sacred geometry, if you want to know your energetic pattern, then what you'll do is you'll track this. You don't have to, but this is the deeper teaching of the Enneagram.
So
Is using the mathematical number to track your soul's pattern so that you can grow and not repeat the same mistakes.
okay, so it's going back that
Francis.
7 years to look at the lesson, but two is like from what I'm like reading into is like your opportunity to make it work for you, essentially, like do your soul's work so that you don't have to sort of repeat the skinny cow. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. It's a little
Okay.
too simplified, okay? So let me reiterate. Your birthday year, so for instance, I'm in a 5 year, is an opportunity for me this year to grow and to look at avarice if I want to do just sort of limited sort of work, right? That's it. Some people will stay there. If I want to go further, then I will go back to where I'm now. In a 5 year, I go back to an 8 year, which in my case was 2016. If I got cancer in 2016, now 7 years later, I am confronted with the lessons of that cancer. I have a choice to grow and do the work, or I can ignore it in my life. I'm not making a choice and I can continue as is. So there's two things going on. There is an energetic flow that your soul will follow. You're just like spring, summer, winter, fall, right? Your numbers are going to flow. There is a second part that is the spiritual work. Spiritual work is a choice. Looking at your soul's patterns and what you come to learn and do and confront your Hydra is a choice. That's where you use your fire. That's a completely different opportunity. So that's when you track this number. This is the inner struggle mathematical number. And it's always a 7 year process because you have to go back to see what you did 7 years ago to see what you're going to learn or confront or work through now. Does that help?
Yes. So that the lot, but is it just an assumption that 7 years ago would have been a 4 year?
No, it's math. If you're in a 2, you were in a 4 7 years ago. Right here, I was in a 2, let's say it's 2019, 2012 was 7 years ago. It's always 7 years. That's the mythology of Joseph and the Pharaoh. That's why the skinny cows. Every 7 years, you are looking at what you started 7 years ago and you're confronted. If you're in a 3-6-9, what you're looking at is consciousness around the choices that you made. If you're in a 1-4-2-8-5-7 year, then you're looking at these themes from 7 years past. That's the only difference for people that are in 3-6-9. They're looking at more of the mental structure. Are they going to act? Are they going to stabilize or neutralize, raise consciousness? Or in your case, in my case, we're in the body. We're having an inner struggle. Inner struggle is a skinny cow, something that I have to control, my free will, my mouth, my desires, my emotions, my passions, something. That is a choice. This is not something you have to do. This is the teaching of tonight. The number that you're in, a 2, is a harmony year, relationship year. That's a great year, not a problem. That's going to happen no matter what. That does not mean spiritual growth. Two different things. Spiritual growth is a choice that every day you choose to grow your soul, to raise consciousness. That's a very different thing than just the seasons coming. Whether you want it or not, it's winter. You know what I'm saying? So 2 different things. We have choice, which we choose to grow, skinny cows, or we only use the energy pattern, which is our birthday number for the year, and we go with the flow, and that's fine. There's no wrong or right. This is for the person that wants to go the step beyond and work deeper.
So Francis, pretty much so I could put it in a different word. For us to do the deeper work, we actually look at the year prior. In this case, she's in a 2, she needs to look at a 4. In your case, you're in a 5, and you will need to look at the, if you want to do the shadow work, if you want to do the deeper work.
Yes.
If not, you just stay to, right? Am I right?
Exactly. And
Okay,
so the
got it.
mystical Enneagram the inner struggle, the whole point of the tool is for you to raise consciousness, for you to go back to a deeper plane in the universe upon your death, for you to make this life make sense to you. If that's not your journey, you don't care, and you just want to know your birthday number, then it's just calculating your number. And if you want, you could take a step further and look at your shadow or your hydra for that year, and that's sufficient. This is for the spiritual aspirant that wants to go deeper into the mystical nature of their soul's energetic pattern and sacred geometry. There's no wrong or right. That's a personal choice.
Francis,
Yes.
so I am gonna start I'm started already in 2022, number 6.
Okay, perfect. So you want to go back to number 3. You want to go back to a 3-year and what you started. So like Marietta is a 9. She's going to go back to 6 year to see what she stabilized so that she can now neutralize it this year. If you're in a 6, you want to go back to year 3 to find out what you actively started in a 3-year.
Francis, me and her, in our case, do we do the subtraction of the 7, or we physically just, let's say for example, for 2022, I deduct 6, and she deducts 3? How do we do that math?
Okay, so
Or is it
Marietta,
7-2?
you're here, you're in a 9, okay?
Okay.
So let's just pretend it's 2026, right? That this says 2022. You
Okay.
would go to 2023, which was what, 2018. So in 2018, the people that have a 3, 6, or 9 year, besides 3 being action and movement, and 6 being stabilization, and 9 being endings, if you want to go the deeper work, 3, 6, 9 years are consciousness years. They're shifting consciousness. They're looking at your limiting beliefs and thoughts, and they're raising consciousness around your thoughts. So you go back just to the prior 6, what you stabilized, and now this is what you're neutralizing. In Claudia's case, she has to go back to 3, which would have been 2018 for her. And now in 2022, she's in a 6. Whatever she started in an active phase of 3, she stabilizes in a 6. She waits to see what comes. It's an
My 3 would
inertia
be
year.
2019.
Or 19. Okay, I'm sorry about the math.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's fine, whatever it was.
So there's a change according to the 3 change in 2019.
Right, 19, 20, 21,
Okay.
22, whatever the math is for your 3-year. So that's how you're going to decide if you're going to work on your mind, your body, your soul. That's why Gurdjieff said the 3 centers of man. Are you working on your heart, which is your soul? Are you working on your mind, 3, 6, 9? Or are you walking on your body, which is 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7? So in your entire lifetime, you have opportunities to work on mind, body, spirit. Marietta in a 9 is working on her spirit. She's ending a cycle. Claudia is working on her mind, and I'm working on my body, just like Suzanne. You're constantly working on one of those 3 centers.
Question.
Yep.
I took algebra 2 probably 4 times. So this is really like hurting my brain, because here's where I think I'm hung up at, is that I'm in a 2. I'm just looking back 7 years, but it technically might not be 7 years. I need to physically map out all these years, or do I know?
What I would recommend for everybody, I started 1973 because I was born in 1973. So Suzanne, after class, take your notepad and do whatever year you were born and go to 9, and then do another 9 and do another 9 and do another 9 and do another 9. And you're going to have this map. And then wherever you have 2022, which is in my case, a 5-year, you're in a 2, you're going to go back to the 4. So if I go here, then I have to go to 2016. If I was in an 8-year, I would need to go back to a 2-year, which is 2001 or 2010. If I was in a 4-year, I'd have to go back to 2003. That's why I mapped it out here. Everybody has the same thing. 2022, 2016, 2010, 2003, 2000. This is for absolutely everybody except the people like Claudia and Marietta that have 369. 369 is 369. You're working on your mind. And 9 in particular, you're working on your soul, where these are working on your body.
Yes, this helps. And by the way, what you just said now to map it out since the day that you were born, that helps me a lot because I was kind of following, I think, Claudia, I don't know if it was the one talking now. I think I was following this and I was completely lost. I'm like, how come I can't do this math? Because this is your math. Right?
And look, I am by no means a math person. When I tell you metaphysics taught me math and music, I know metaphysics, not math. But I follow the numbers. So just, this is my year of birth, 73. So just after class, map it out. And if you want to send me a picture of this, I'll help you figure it out. You know, all of you guys know me, and send me an email and I'll help you figure it out. But the key thing to know is, what is the universe providing the opportunity? To work on your soul, like Marietta, which is to wrap up the cycle. Are you working on your mind, which has to do with your level of consciousness, changing your thoughts? Or are you working on your body, which is that inner struggle of purification, planting seeds like we talked about with Jesus? So when Gurdjieff says the 3 centers of man, that's what he's talking about. This is the heart center, ultimately the soul, the mind or the intellectual center, and then the body. That's why I showed you all the math earlier. 3 and 6 has a breakdown to a digital root. 9 is the addition of all of them. And this is the map of the body. So if you start here with your birth year, I think it'll be easier. So you have a visual. All I did was I showed you 2022, and then I highlighted 2016 in yellow so you could see that I went back. It's always going to be a 7-year stretch if you're dealing with your body. It's a skinny cow. Does that help?
Francis, I don't even understand what you're saying about like start with your birth year and then I'm just clarifying.
Sure.
You start
what
with
year
your
were
birth year and then you add 9 and then you take that year and then you add 9.
What year were you born?
1966.
Okay,
66.
1966. I have 73. I was born in 66. Okay, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74. You were 9 years old in 1974. Then you start over 75, 76, 77, 78, and so forth.
Oh, like that.
Yes.
Hey, Francis, could you do it one more time with 59?
Absolutely. So Henry, 59 is 1, 60 is 2, 61 is 3, 64 is 4, 65 is 5, 66 is 6, 67 is 7, 68 is 8, 69 is 9. 70 will be a 1 again, and then you'll continue. So you may not remember your first 9 years, but you'll remember when you're 16, you'll remember when you're 25. So you could start finding the thread of what that year is going to bring. We only have one pattern. So if an illness or a death or a breakup is the pattern you identify for that stretch, then you know that that's what's coming and you can be prepared and you can plan for it. That's why I put it in the order that I did. So these are all of my 1 years. These are all of my 2 years. These are all of my 3 years. So just put your birthday in order. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear on that.
Yeah, by the way, doing it like this makes a lot of sense.
Oh,
okay, great.
I have just one last question to make sure I understand. So my number 1 is in 1966, and then my number 9 is a 2000. Well, I didn't do that one. I did up to the 8 years 2020. Is that correct?
Okay, you're a 66.
Yeah.
2 is a 67. 3 is a 68. Now go all the way to 9 and then start again until you get to 2022. I can't do that for you right now. You'll have to map it out on your own in your paper.
Okay. If
But
I
it's
don't understand, I'll
ages,
message
you're
you. Never
age
mind.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then you're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, 19, 20, 21. I mean, you're just gonna go in order of 9.
Okay.
So last question, and so when I do all this, like I thought I was in a 2-year, that 2022 doesn't line up to be a 2-year.
Okay, what's your birthday, Suzanne?
1979.
No,
So when I
what's your
do
birthday? What's your
Oh,
birthday?
6/17,
6/17. Okay, so
1979.
6 plus 1 is 7. 7 plus 7 is 14. That's a 5. Plus 6 is 11. That is a 2-year.
Okay.
You take your birthday, your birth month, and then 2022, everybody gets a 6. Let me just take you back. Everybody is in 2022. Your birthday, your birth month. This math is simply the year you're in. I am in a 5-year. If I want to do nothing else, but know that I am in a 5-year of growth, that is fine. That is what the energy of the world, rhythm, law of rhythm is bringing me. If I, Francis, want to go a step further to my spiritual growth, I will go to here, 2022, and go back to 8 and find out the correlation that my soul is telling me to look back at 2016. That happened to be when I got cancer. So I have a very clear pattern that I need to look at. If your number is 1428571, you're going to work on your body. If your number is 36, you're going to work on your mind. And if your number is 9, it is a soul year where you're reflecting the circle.
So that other number we did where we created 6/17/2022 is me. That was a 2-year. It actually, it doesn't have anything to do with this.
Yes, absolutely is something to do with this.
So I guess when I did this whole thing that you said to do, 2022 doesn't fall on a 2-year, it falls on an 8-year.
No, 6 plus 1 plus 7 plus 2022 is a 2. Did you start with your birthday year here?
Yes.
Okay, I would recommend you redo it.
And Francis, can you show us one more time the page where you did your birthday?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
And this is why I do not teach math. Okay.
Oh my God.
Everybody is in 2022 right now. 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 6. Everybody. So everybody is going to add 6 to their birth month, which for me is 3, and your birthday, which in my case is 14. So 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 3 is 8, plus 6 is 14, and I break that down to a 5. I am in a 5-year. So my rhythm, my law of rhythm, the cycle that I am in, if I am just going in the order of 1 to 9, which law of rhythm, that's why I shared that, is a 5. All I have to do is look at 5. So 5 is growth. Something's going to grow in this world this year. And if I want to go to my shadow, I'm going to work on avarice. That's it. That's plan A. That's plan A. You do not have to go deeper. If you want to go deeper, if you want to use your fire, if you want to grow spiritually and map out your soul's pattern, then you go to this. Map out your birthday throughout 9, all the way to the current year if you want. I went to 2026 just to make it uniform. Identify where you are. I'm in a 5. And because 5, I have to go back to 8 to know what I bought at Publix at 8. And now is what I'm eating for dinner in 2022. I go back to 2016. I got cancer. So my cancer is related to this year's growth. Because it's one of these numbers, I have to work on my body. For Marietta, she has a 9. She's going to work on her soul. She's going to go back to her 3-6. And for Claudia, who's in a 6, she's going to work on her mind and she's going to go back to her pattern of 3-year.
Francis,
Yes.
when I go back to the third or the year 3, after that, what's next? Because I'm not following the pattern of the, so which year will be next after that?
Okay, if you're in a 3-year now,
6.
you're in a 6. Okay,
I
next year
go
you're
to
going to be in a
3.
7.
And then I go from there according to
Next year you're going to be in a
the
7.
the
So you're
1,
going
4,
to go
2,
to
8, 5, 7, 1.
2023.
Okay.
In
And then I
2023,
go
you're
back
going to
to
be
the
in a
5.
7 and you're going to go back to a 5. And then this
Okay.
pattern will match.
Listen, Francis, I want to interrupt everybody. I literally just did all my years. And once you do the years, it's a lot easier.
Thank you.
Really, really, really easy when you map out the years. My year ended up in 2030. And it's just really easy to go back once you write it down.
Yeah, I did mine too. I just did mine and it makes sense.
It makes sense when you map it out with, when you start with your year of birth, it just makes a lot of sense.
So that's your pattern. And so this number, which is the geometrical or the universal number linked to the inner struggle and the body, are going to be body focused years. For instance, 3, 6, 9 are going to be mind and consciousness years. And 9 specifically is going to be a soul year. So let me just take you back to the beginning. Where I explained here. So 3, 6, 9 are always higher consciousness. So that's why it's always mental. If you are in a 1, 2, or 4, you are going to be linked to the 3 year of your consciousness. That's an action year. So anybody who is in a 1, 2, 4, okay, is going to take action.
There's
If
2.
you're in an 8, 5, or 7, you're going to not do anything. You're going to be inertial.
Yes, it does. I'm in a 2-year.
And I'm in a 6-year, and mine is 26. What does that have to do with anything?
Okay, questions? So I can continue? If you have questions after class, doing your math, you can feel free to reach out. I will be happy to help you.
I'm so fucked. Excuse me.
Okay, so this is just a simple explanation. So here I'm in 2022, right? I went to 2022, 2013, 2004, and 1995. And this was a theme about my academic career. This year I opened a college. In 2013, I ran a college. I was a dean of a college. I graduated college. So you're going to start finding themes. This is a very simple one. Obviously, this is deeper soul work. You're going to try to find, like my cancer one was a deeper one. So you're going to track all of the same years. So now this is for everybody. So Marietta is going to track all of her 9 years and find a theme. Now this is the third thing you could do. Okay, so you get 3 options. You just do the year that you're in and you identify what's going to happen. Great. You can go deeper body, soul, or mind work. And the third thing is whatever year you're in, I'm in a 5-year, I found a thread between everything in a 5-year. So I would know what 22 was about. And everybody can do that based on the grid that they create for themselves. Does that make sense?
Super interesting, but yes.
Okay. So everybody, no matter what your number, you're going to have 2022, 2013, 2004, 1995. You might have earlier than that if you're older. And you're going to find a theme. So now you know in my next 5-year, which is going to be 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, maybe I want to rebrand the college. Maybe I want to offer a different program. Maybe I want to go back to school. I know that there is a theme associated with all of my 5 years. In my case, it was college. Does that make sense? That's your third option of what to do with this.
Francis,
Yes.
so for my 6th year in 1995, I got married, and in 2004, I got divorced.
There you go. So now, Claudia, that's going to be your pattern. Relationships. 4 years are crisis construction years. So now the next time you have that, let's say you get into a relationship, which is very probable because the energy will repeat itself. You're going to be maybe more cautious. You're going to ask more questions. You're going to make decisions about how you want to be involved in relationship. That's just one example. So there's 3 ways you could use this. Your birth year, your number 5, and just have fun with it. Your soul's work, which is this chart. And then the third is identifying the number year previous of every thread of the number you're in and everything that built 5 year after 5 year after 5 year. So you've got 3 options in which to grow. Questions? Okay,
So
I have one.
yes.
So I added up the numbers and I'm in a 9-year.
Okay,
But when I look on the chart that I made, now I'm confused again. The 2022 lines up with the 3-year.
okay,
Does
you're
that make
gonna have
sense?
to do your map and then just reach out to me after, because I can't do everyone individual. You're gonna have to just sit, lay out your numbers and get it organized. If you start with your birthday year, you will have a map just like this, just like Mariette, I promise.
No, I have it. I have the map. I
Okay,
have
so
the
then
map.
what's
I'm
the
just trying to
question?
correlate the thing that you had us do today with the adding up our birthday and 2022 to find
Okay,
out
what's
what
your birthday? May
year.
what?
No, my birthday is April
April.
26th. I already got like a 9. I added up the numbers and got a 9, like a 9-year.
Yes, you're in a 9-year. So what you're going to
Right.
do, like Marietta, is either you're going to just do endings, that's your one option. You're going to work on your soul, which means you need to look at the pattern of what you did in a 3-6 year. And the third option is to go to every 9-year and see what thread matches up in every 9-year you've had since you were born. Those are your 3 options. You have option A,
No,
B, and C,
okay.
and you can do them all.
Francis, I think
Okay.
what she's saying is that when she mapped it out, the last like 2022, right? Just like it did it for me. It doesn't land on the number 9, but I don't think
Right,
that's
right.
accurate because exactly. That's why I understood you, because it happened to me too. But I think what Francis, that's okay. What Francis says is, I remember that usually the year lags a little bit. Remember? At some
Yes,
point she said
it
that?
can lag a little bit because of your birthday.
Correct. So that's why.
Okay.
Marietta's in November 1st. So she's gonna
Oh, I
get
see.
the results of a 9-year later in the year. She's still lagging in the 8.
So that's why
I see.
for you and for me, 2022, it actually starts on a 1, not on a 9. So 2021 is still on the 9. Because we're still
Got it.
feeling the effects, like what Francis says at some point. We still feel the effects, and the closer we get. So maybe for you, that soul, the essence of that number 9 is going to get closer to April when your birthday is. And for me, chances are I will get that feeling closer to my birthday.
Thank you.
But if you
Thank you.
plot it out, but that's
You're welcome.
absolutely right. It'll linger a bit. Okay, so spiritual practices. So this is, for those of you who have worked with me, which I think is everybody, the triangle that I use for my model, okay? So I'm just using a basic triangle. If you are in a 1-4-2 year, you are in an active year, okay? You wanna be active, you wanna go, you wanna do, you wanna plant seeds, okay? This is the Rajas energy. If you are in an 8, 5, or 7 year, you want to stay still. You want to believe and feel that perhaps there's nothing to do. Things just are stabilizing. And if you're in a 9 year, you're wrapping up all of the previous 8 years. And I said before, if you add up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you get 36, which is a 9. So for Marietta, who's in a 9, or Lisa, who's in a 9, you're wrapping up everything from the previous 8 years. So just do the sort of neutralizing or balancing of what it was. So a lot of times we think that we're wasting time, okay? Especially if we're in this section of the numerology. And it isn't true. So time is relative. There's two Greek words for time. One is kairos and one is chronos. Chronos is chronological time, okay? It is now January 19, 2022. We're all obligated. Kairos is divine timing. The numbers of the sequence 1428571, because they deal with the body, are dealing with the third dimension. You need to be in the body. You need to work something through, your desires, your passions, your shadow, your emotions. That is the function of working in those numbers. If you have a 3, 6, or 9 year, you're working in higher dimensions, and the concept of time is not as meaningful. And so what you're doing is you're looking at your thoughts, because the thoughts don't have a time constraint. So depending on the number that you're in, you may feel, so for instance, these numbers here that I said before, the 8, 5, and 7, you might think you're wasting time because you're not supposed to act. You're supposed to be still in these years. That's fine. It's kairos. It's divine timing. The world is working with you. The universe is working with you. You're not late for anything. Chronos is linked more to 1, 4, and 2 years because there's something to do. There's time, you have to act, you have to get a job, you have to have a baby, you have to build a house. There's something that you're being active with. And then a 9 year is the culmination of all of them. That's why it's the soul. So this is more of the doing, this is more of the being, and this is more of the closing of the cycles. So this idea of the body, of the mind, determines what you're going to focus on in a particular year. And if it happens to be one of these sort of tamasic years where you're calming down, don't worry, you're not late for anything. So one of the reasons that in particular we work with the number code of 142857 is because of the body. I mentioned before, our bodies are sinful, our bodies are flawed, our bodies have desire. If we don't like our body, we will dissociate. We will check out. And you cannot burn karma, you cannot raise consciousness, you surely cannot do spiritual work out of the form. That's why I spent that slide on Jesus and all the symbolism of the number 6 and the seeds. Whatever you do has to be in the form. That's why I said nothingness is everything and everything is in the form. So specifically for people that are in the 142857 sequence, the body is extremely important. They might be painful years. They might be years of burning karma. They might be years that you have to exercise and lose weight. You might be having a baby. The body is birthing something. But it is only through the body, it is only an embodiment that we can actually do the soul's work. And in spirituality, we often think that we can transcend the body and not be in the body. And that is absolutely incorrect. Our spiritual work is done in the body. So after those years of body work, you focus on the mind, you raise consciousness, you come right back into the body. You do the body sequence, you do the raising consciousness in your mind, your soul increases a vibration, you get back in the body. It is a cycle. It is the same cycle of the universe. When you die, you leave the body, you go to a plane of the universe raised on your, determined by your level of consciousness and your vibration, and then you reincarnate and come in the body. That's why the Enneagram is a universal symbol. It's not just for the lifetime, it's even what happens beyond. So the years that are linked to the mathematical sequence are body years. Some level of crisis, of sin, of passion, of emotional, of detachment, of death must occur. The body is where the inner struggle happens. Nobody can save you from that. If you do these years right, the mind years will be easier, and the soul, of course, will raise consciousness. So we see that the Enneagram is a mind, body, spirit map of how we are to live our life and our spiritual growth. Any questions on that? Okay, so Gurdjieff.
Yes.
What?
So that the year that you're in doesn't necessarily line up with the graph that you make, correct?
Yes, of course it does.
Okay. Mine doesn't. So
Okay.
that's
Well, afterwards, send it to me tomorrow. We'll look at it, because yes, it absolutely
Yeah.
lines up from 1 to 9 and 10 to 18 and 19 to whatever. Yes, it's math. Math lines up. So the whirling dervishes are the mystical branch of Sufism, and they engage in these sacred dances. I have a link here. When I send you the slides, you can actively click on it, and you can see some of the dances. So what I did here was I explained their posture, and what they do is they cross their arms in front of their chest or their heart center. They raise their arm. Their right arm or their right palm is upward towards heaven. That is the masculine. So it goes with that triangle that goes upwards. And their left palm is downwards, which is the feminine or the downward pointing triangle. So what they're doing is they're connecting to their energy balance in the earth. In their body, you have masculine and feminine energies. And then they start whirling and twirling in a counterclockwise direction. This is a physical or an active meditation. There are now sort of spin-offs of this with sacred dances. Osho had active meditations. They're all based on these physical active meditations from Sufism. Gurdjieff created his own dances. They were sacred movements to teach students how to raise consciousness. And there's a link here to all of his types of dancers. There's actually schools where you can learn those different dances. And what they're doing is they're using a form of the Enneagram to follow the pattern of the universe, the mathematical pattern of the universe in the dances. So that is one of the practices that you can do depending on whatever you do for your body, specifically if in you're one of those embodiment years, to bring yourself back into the body. So it's not the only ones, but because this is what Gurdjieff taught and Sufis do, I wanted to share these links with you. What you're doing at the end of the day is you're making the body suitable for the deity that dwells inside. We want our body to, besides being a vehicle for desires and flaws and imperfections, to be pure so that it can house the soul, so it can house the spirit. And it's only through the purification in those earthly years, in those body years, that we can actually shift consciousness in the mind and make the body suitable for the soul, which is the circle. Any questions?
Can this be done even in my case and Lisa's case that we are in a year 9?
Absolutely. Actually, it is very recommended because you are closing cycles and you're in a process of neutralizing or balancing. Vishnu is the god of balance. If you've ever done meditation and you press your thumb against your index finger, when you sit in meditation, that's called the Vishnu mudra. That is to balance your energies. So anything that is active meditation that's moving around is balancing your mind, your body, and your spirit. So 9 years, absolutely, any years. But the point of this activity, specifically finding the mathematical sequence, is that if you're attracted to spirituality, and I know all of you, right? You don't want to be in the body. You don't like your body. You think you're beyond the body. That is part of the nature of people that are spiritual seekers. That's why every single philosophy reminds us that the only place that we can do spiritual work is in the body. And so understanding these patterns can prevent illness, because illness is a function of getting you back in the body, connected with your body. So this entire lecture is about knowing those years that are specifically important, even though they're going to be inner struggle, even though they might be painful, even though they might come with conflict, even though they might come with loss and inertia, that the work is done in the body. And so the dances are an embodiment practice to remind you that the soul, the mind, the body, it's all here right now. Nothing is everything. And we cannot get out of the form. We have to learn to love this vehicle and everything it teaches us with this inner struggle, so that we can grow, transmute our belief system and grow in consciousness. And then hopefully our next time around, it's a little easier.
Francis,
Yes.
I have like a something I wanted to share to see if how it resonates with you. So like, since I'm in a 9-year and I'm trying to start my business and everything, I get the concussion because it's like, I'm in a 9-year, right? So they're like, slow the hell down. So you can like contemplate and like kind of finish up. Does that make sense?
Exactly. It's a completion year. So what I would do is tell you to look at your 3-year and your 6-year and see what you started and maybe what you didn't finish, or what you started and you started wrapping up in the 6, and that will indicate what to complete in the 9-year. And the concussion is probably a way of slowing you down, because the body is what will keep us on schedule. The body is the form. The body is what we need to do our spiritual work. And most of us that are attracted to these practices want to get out of the form because we judge it, because it's flawed, because it's sinful. That's why you need to do your shadow work constantly.
Yeah, I feel like it was like,
the shadow is unchangeable. The sins are unchangeable. Your desirous nature is unchangeable. And these practices and tracking your cycles show you that there is a reason. The inner struggle, that was the first slide, the inner struggle that is found only in the body is all a perception of your mind. If you shift consciousness in 3, 6, and 9 years, which is your mind years, your body years are going to be a little easier. But we don't tend to do that. We tend to be very stubborn people, and we want to fight and fight and fight. And then, we break down our body or whatnot. So this is a technique to show you what's coming, that you are guided by the universe. There is a method to the madness here. The struggle serves you to grow in consciousness and then help you when you're out of the body to reach a level of the universe or a plane in the universe that is higher. So there is a method to all of this. That's why mathematics is one of the languages of the universe, and finding this pattern is sacred, and it's hidden in all the texts. And the point of tonight was to pull it out, to point it out that we do have a pattern, and we can make our life a little easier if we know our pattern. Anything else before we wrap up? And you guys can send me questions. I talk to you guys all day. So just shoot me a message when you're mapping it out if you have questions, and I'll be happy to answer for your particular numbers and such. Thank you very much. Give me a second.